One way of thinking about tea is to imagine a world without tea. Millions of people in moments of stress or worry or celebration reach for a cup of tea. Many people's lives would be emptied out without drinking tea.
Tea originated in China more than 5,000 years ago. Once drunk for its medicinal properties, tea is now the world's favorite beverage.
More tea is drunk than any other liquid than water on this planet. So it's special, and there's a huge amount of reverence for it. There are many temples and holy places which are devoted to tea. It's a worshipful object.
The city of Cambridge in the UK is a centre of learning and cultural exchange, a place where knowledge has been passed down for centuries. Today, students are welcomed to a special class, exploring the artistry and heritage of the ancient Chinese tea ceremony.
Wow, this looks beautiful.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome you here for the first tea tasting session of the spring. Today, we will demonstrate the selection of green tea which we preserved from last year.
So there are very light hint of spring grass, very beautiful.
While Chinese tea technically comes from the same plant, several distinct types have evolved over centuries: white, green, black, oolong, and the rarest, yellow, each with their own variations.
Actually, if you look at the tea here, there are a lot of varieties that came from different areas of China. So we can see a map of tea of China. Because China is a very big country, and we have a coast area, we have a mountainous area. So different area, we have different kind of tea plants.
Tea was further shaped by religion, trade, and the craftsmanship of tea masters. Buddhist monks sought the purity in green tea. Emperors prized delicate white teas, and merchants relied on black teas for long-distance trade. This pu'er tea from Yunnan province has been skillfully preserved inside citrus peel. Flower tea is hand-tied with edible flowers, unfurling into a floral bloom in hot water.
So now I'm going to brew another very famous tea, rock tea from Wuyi Mountain. The tea plants grow in the crevices of the rocks.
Rock tea is a type of roasted oolong, known for its rich mineral taste and complex flavors.
So you can see that the tea leaves is much longer and bigger. Would you like to try? Smell it.
Oh, lovely. It's almost chocolatey in a way.
Yeah.
And you've got a different teapot there. Is there something special about that teapot?
For brewed Chinese tea, actually it's not only about the tea, but also the teaware, also very important. So different tea, we normally use different kind of teaware to brew it.
Clay teapots like this absorb flavors over time, creating a seasoned vessel that enhances each brew. Others, like porcelain or glass, preserve the tea's taste, making them ideal for delicate teas or switching between varieties.
So tea in ancient China, over 2,000 years ago, it was considered as a remedy, like a medicine.
Chinese medicine theory is all based on the theory of we are part of nature, and we are as a whole, as a unit.
How important is tea to the people of China?
Tea creates opportunity for us to gather together, to share not only tea, but also share different kind of beautiful teaware. And also you share your personal taste. You present your personal taste with your friends. They want to calm down in a very busy day, so they can have a reflection about their life, about today. It's like meditation. So don't talk about the future, don't talk about the past, but we enjoy the moment. We enjoy tea.
Running right through like a thread through Chinese civilization, like a color, like a dye that has dyed China with a different color. Everything is infused with tea.
Professor Alan Macfarlane here at Cambridge University has written extensively on the subject.
Well, tea is in my blood because I was born in Assam, one of the great tea-producing areas in Shillong, and my father was a manager of a tea estate for 25 years, and so I was brought up among tea bushes. I used to tell my students to drink tea before their exams. It reduces cancers, it reduces strokes, heart attacks, it's good for the teeth, it's very good for the eyes. It increased your memory and your concentration by 20 to 30%.
Do you think it was China's intention for tea to spread all around the world?
My book is called Green Gold, The Empire of Tea, and I have this conceit that it's not that we that spread tea, that tea is using us to spread itself, which is what plants do. They attract animals who then spread it around, and tea attracted human beings. So the Chinese were great traders, and they traded all sorts of other things like silks and porcelain and other things along the Silk Road. And the great advantage of tea as a trade good, obviously, is that it has high value for weight. In other words, you can carry a lot of tea on the back of a camel or in a ship, and you get a lot of money for it, and it's very scarce.
Although tea passed through several European countries before reaching Britain, most favoured the growing trend of coffee drinking, and none embraced tea quite as wholeheartedly as the British, turning it into a sought-after luxury enjoyed by the super-rich in its pure green form, just as it had been in China.
Could you paint a picture for me of what Britain was like at that time when tea first started to arrive?
It was the most affluent country in general wealth of anywhere in the world. Because of its wealth, it ate really good food, and it also drank very well. The English took the view that water was very dangerous, which it was, so you should never drink water. So what else could you drink? Well, you drank beer.
As a safer alternative to contaminated water, tea gradually replaced beer as the everyday drink. Unlike the male-dominated alehouses and coffee houses, tea found favour in the domestic setting.
Tea became the property of women. It was the women who made the tea, served the tea.
By the 1700s, tea was no longer just a luxury, but becoming a daily ritual for all classes. The rise of black tea, oxidised for long journeys, saw the introduction of milk and sugar to soften its bold flavours, shaping Britain's tea culture. Ships were built to trade more quickly, and prices became more competitive. By the 1800s, demand for tea was so high that sailing ships, known as clippers, would race from China to England. The Cutty Sark was one of the fastest vessels of this era, and now stands in London as the world's last remaining clipper ship.
Why was it so important to be first on the tea delivery?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing because obviously tea being a dry product, it was a bit of a fallacy, really. But for aspirant Victorians, I think there was a real fashion growing that they wanted the very first. So if you could get back to London first, you could command the highest prices. So in this time, there were great races between clipper ships where cash award was given to the first ship to arrive back in London. And this garnered a lot of press attention, so there was a great deal of excitement building around these beautiful tea clippers, which were pinnacle of Victorian design, but also, crucially, the cargo that they were carrying, this exotic, beautiful tea. But if you think that just one cargo was worth £6 million in today's money, I think that paints a picture that it was pretty big business and a huge part of British life.
And what was the journey the tea would then take?
A voyage would tend to last about a year, really, because it would take roughly 120 days to get out and around about the same to get back. And then you'd also spend a bit of time in China securing that cargo.
With so much effort being poured into Britain's growing obsession with tea, we could ask, was it really just about a drink? Or could the resilient tea plants have been quietly shaping the course of history?
The most important effect is that it made the British Industrial Revolution possible, because until tea arrived, there was no possibility that large cities could grow to a size where you could begin to get industrial growth. Because what always happened was that as the city expanded, the water was polluted and you got waterborne diseases. And so suddenly, the population of London, Manchester, Birmingham, and so on in the 18th century could go on growing.
Helping cities to grow by providing safer drinking water wasn't the only thing that tea was bringing to the table.
You find that from that time onwards, the factories and the mines are incredibly difficult places to work in. You're working with dangerous machinery or deep in the ground. They were sustained by tea. The tea break and the tea trolley were the only ways that people could concentrate for hours on end doing this repetitive and boring work. So we would not have had an industrial revolution, nor would we have had the British Empire, because the pillar of the British Empire was trade, and the pillar of that trade was the East India Company, trading to India. And the East India Company was centrally around the trade of tea from China. So without the tea trade, the East India Company would have been nothing like what it was, and our empire in India and hence elsewhere would have been just a shadow of what it was.
The Industrial Revolution was transforming Britain. Cities were booming, factories were rising, and workers needed fuel to keep up the pace. But relations with China were being tested. The Opium Wars mark a dark moment in the history of Britain and China's trading relationship. What began as a thriving exchange of tea and goods soon spiraled into conflict.
The Chinese wanted only payment in silver, and this was something that the British government had decided was not sustainable. So they had to find another way of recouping the silver. The option they selected was to grow opium in India and then smuggle that opium into China. And they were then paid in silver. So they recouped this silver with this nefarious method.
At this time, opium was forbidden in China, and various efforts were made to stop the growing trend. These attempts angered the British authorities, who retaliated with force, ultimately triggering the conflict.
So before the Opium War, only Canton had been open to foreign trade. After the Opium War, other ports had been forced to open.
And then also there was a very interesting twist where a Scottish botanist by the name of Robert Fortune, he was actually instrumental in what we call, agricultural espionage.
The British felt if they could get the tea plants and the closely guarded secrets of how to process the tea out of China, they could grow and produce it themselves.
He went into China disguised, spoke the language, blended with the locals. He stole about 20,000 saplings of tea, which were then cultivated in the northeastern part of India in a small town called Darjeeling.
It was here that Britain's grand quest to import tea from China took an ironic twist when they discovered India's indigenous Assam tea plants had been thriving all along, right under their noses.
So Darjeeling was where Chinese tea bushes slowly flourished, and Assam is where Assam tea bushes were found to be indigenously grown.
Fortune and his accomplices recruited Chinese tea farmers to share their cultivation practices, recreating the plant's ideal conditions, true to their Chinese heritage.
And established the industry that we now know today in India and Africa, and broke free of being reliant just on trading with the Chinese.
Jonathan Jones is a horticulturalist, an expert in botanical innovation, working at one of Britain's most celebrated estates, which, as fate would have it, happens to be home to an historical treasure, with direct links to Robert Fortune himself.
So what's this, Jonathan?
This is a travelling greenhouse, a Wardian case named after Nathaniel Bagshaw Ward.
Oh, wow.
This is a complete, exact replica of the oldest surviving one that was found here at Tregothnan in one of the garden sheds. And it was used by Robert Fortune, and what's good about it is that you can lift it up and pop the tea bushes inside, and the water that you've added inside stays inside because it runs down and stays in there like a bottle garden concept. Most of the world's countries that now grow tea got the tea bushes through one of these travelling greenhouses.
So where did they find it?
I was cleaning out a shed, and one of the garden guys said to me, "Have you seen this old rabbit hutch?" It was under a pile of netting. And when I got to it, I couldn't believe my eyes, because I'd read all about these things. I could not believe that this was a surviving Wardian case. And yeah, this is amazing. It's a living piece of history.
China still accounts for up to 40% of the world's tea production, followed by India, Kenya, and Sri Lanka. With tea's reach extending across these tropical regions, its global conquest was well underway. But few could have imagined that this special plant would one day set seed in the most unlikely of landscapes.
Welcome to the UK's oldest tea plantation.
Wow, this is stunning.
Tregothnan in Cornish, meaning the house at the head of the valley, and we benefit from warm Atlantic weather and lots of rain. So we have a true microclimate here, which allows us to grow not just one kind of tea, but lots of Chinese teas. We've got tea bushes from the east coast of China all the way out to Yunnan.
How much tea is here?
Oh, almost 2 acres. This was a trial site, and the first of this kind of tea on this river. Although it's south-facing, people think, oh, tea needs hot, dry conditions. It actually hates that. It wants to be in shade. It likes warm, wet conditions. But when you get them up to this high, they shelter each other. And this is what we call the plucking table. These bushes are at least 10 years old now. Tea needs a really specific set of conditions. And the trick is, if you find baby tea bushes growing underneath, you know they're really happy.
Tregothnan produces around 10 to 15 tons of tea per year, grown, harvested, and processed directly on the estate.
And there's 5 steps. This is step 1. This is plucking, and we're taking the top 2 leaves and the bud.
Just the little tip.
Just the little tips. There's loads to choose from. Lovely season has started, and then we can put these out here to wither.
Okay.
And that would
Wither our tea leaves.
Withering them, and that's step 2. The leaves are softening, wilting literally, and they go quite rubbery. And then you can pick them up and roll them, which is step 3. That's doing this gently, not
Just a little handful.
Yeah. The main thing is to bruise them, and then oxidation begins, and you start to get the tea flavour, or the smell.
Smells kind of sweet, doesn't it?
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's the first of this year, and it just takes you straight into that beautiful summery. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, ready for the cuppa.
Yeah. The natural juices or chemicals within the leaf react with each other, a bit like when you cut an apple and it goes from green to brown. Same is happening with this. And in China, they stop the oxidation at different stages to get different kinds of tea. So if you want green tea, you would let it go a little way. If you want white tea, you wouldn't do this at all. You'd literally pick and dry. Finally, black tea, which is what most people want. Maximum oxidation, and then you get a really strong black tea. Look at that.
So what's the next step? What do we do with this now?
Well, it depends how patient you are, Amelia. You can either put hot water on that and drink a very fresh green tea, which would have very light flavour, or you can leave that overnight, and by lunchtime tomorrow you'll have storable or drinkable tea.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, John.
Good to see you.
Lovely to see you.
Come
Thanks for
along in
having
and
me.
come
Thank you.
taste some tea. Now, this is blended with Darjeeling.
And here we have it. Tea cultivated for centuries in China, now grown in the UK, and even blended with Indian varieties. Who would have thought so much cultural exchange could have been found in a simple cup of tea? Lighter?
Yes, it's softer. Darjeeling tea is lighter, so we call that afternoon tea because that is what you would traditionally drink in the afternoon. To finish with, we'll go on to what we call the single estate. This is pure Tregothnan tea, not blended, so it tastes different from batch to batch.
Ooh. Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, it's different.
It has a
isn't
very
it?
distinctive flavour. Now, this is the ones we sell to China.
Right.
They love it. Now, the Chinese look at tea in much the way we look at very fine wine. It's all about where it's grown, what the climate's been like.
Tells you a whole story.
Yes, and this is exactly the same with the tea.
Yeah, really
Absolutely.
fresh. Could definitely drink that without milk.
Oh,
Do you
yes.
have this one with milk?
No.
No, no.
No.
Absolutely not. As the tea plant continues its march across continents, taking root in new lands, it wasn't just the British developing a passion for it. Through trade routes along the Silk Road and expanding commercial networks, regions like the Middle East, India, and Russia were also shaping their own tea traditions.
You know, some would add ginger, some would add cardamom, some would add cinnamon.
The addition of ingredients like milk, sugar, fruits, and spices became an essential part of the evolving tea rituals, shaping the cultural traditions that continue to influence how it's enjoyed around the world today.
Many people may not realize, but every single day, 7 billion cups of tea are drunk around the world. So that's almost every single human on the planet having a cup of tea every single day. That's how ubiquitous and global and international it is.
Tea is so good because you can enjoy it at the absolute pinnacle of an experience in the best hotels, but also you can have a builder's brew in a mug.
But the British have elevated it to a decadent ritual. Afternoon tea is now a vital part of London's tourism sector, with a growing market worth more than £800 million.
So what is afternoon tea? What do you get in the experience?
Tea is, in our culinary world, has probably become one of the most prominent traditions. And in a way, you can wonder why, because in theory, you just had lunch and you're about to have dinner. Yet we're having this rather extravagant three-course sandwiches, scones, followed by pastry meal. So what's the necessity of all of this? I mean, if you look around the room right now, Amelia, and you see what's surrounding us, it's literally just happy faces. They're all here to really appreciate the time together. I think because it is so unnecessary, it became such a wonderful occasion to celebrate and link this sort of meal, which isn't lunch and isn't dinner and is in the middle of the afternoon, with the celebration. And I think that's exactly what over centuries and centuries marked it as such a special moment to celebrate.
5,000 years since its original conception, tea continues to find new ways to stay relevant, reinvent itself, and remain an integral part of people's lives and hearts. From traditional loose-leaf brews to modern wellness infusions, the story of tea is far from over. Just when it seemed like tea innovations had reached a limit, along came a phenomenon known as bubble tea. Emerging in Taiwan in the 1980s, it's defined by its signature ingredient, tapioca, sweet, chewy pearls made from cassava starch, which was once a key energy source for Taiwan's indigenous hunters. The sweet, multi-sensory creation of bubble tea has grown in popularity across Asia, the United States, and now Europe. Bubbleology is the UK's largest bubble tea brand, with dozens of locations around the country. It now has 3 franchises in central London, including this one in Bloomsbury, London's historic literary quarter. Kristen McCoy-Ward's bubble tea story began as a student in Southern California. She then moved to the UK and opened her own business, and now travels the world, tracking bubble tea's continuing global rise.
So how similar is this to regular tea?
Very similar, actually. So majority of bubble tea has tea in it. And back there on the counter, you can see they're doing Assam black tea and jasmine green tea. Those are the 2 main bases that are used in bubble tea generally, and most of those teas are coming from China as well. But sometimes you'll see things like oolong, or maybe a smoky oolong, or maybe they'll just do like a jasmine, or they will just do a green tea, or they'll do a combination of the 2. You know, 9 times out of 10, a bubble tea drink is definitely gonna have tea in it.
So you can really define yourself by your bubble tea preferences.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so popular is the fact that you are what you say your favorite drink is. Like, there's some people who walk into a bubble tea shop and they're very adventurous and they want to try everything on the menu. But there's some people who go in and they like, I'm just a brown sugar tapioca pearl person, or like, I just like taro, or I'm just a classic milk tea fan, right? So that bubble tea kind of defines people, but it also allows people to be a little adventurous with who they are.
The bubble tea market is expected to double in size in the UK and Europe within 10 years, and will be worth an estimated $2 billion globally by 2035.
And here's the interesting thing. If you look at who makes up the majority of the global market, it's Asia Pacific, Southeast Asia, China, all of those areas. So they are not only leading it in terms of money, but also in terms of trends. So on my recent trip to China, I saw a lot of trends that didn't really exist before. And it wasn't until I came back a few months later, I'm starting to see tiny, tiny bits coming through. A lot of it is going back to the tea basics, actually. I think sometimes we go so far away from the actual tea itself, we get too many flavors, it becomes too sweet. So I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in China right now, for example, is base flavored, very strong, high quality tea with a little bit of milk and maybe a little bit of sugar, and that's it. So it's the tea flavor that's shining through. And that is super important.
If you were going to write a book about bubble tea, what would the ending be?
Oh dear. I don't know actually, because I feel like there wouldn't really be an ending at this point. I don't really see an end to bubble tea. All I keep seeing it is just going on and on and on. So I think it would be a very, very long book, unfortunately, that doesn't have an end. It'll just keep going, exactly.
Tea seems to be something that's been reimagined and reinvented so many times over the generations. Where do you think it's going in the future?
I think we are now in the right track because nowadays we emphasize everything to be natural, organic, and to be earthy.
Inviting people for tea gathering become more and more popular. Tea has a very special character, is the harmony. So just several dry leaves and with hot water, wait a little bit time, and you have an aromatic liquid to share with your friends. You think about the peace, you think about the harmony.
They say today that there are more teas in China than there are wines in Western Europe. And that just shows the sort of mind-blowing diversity and endless flair that tea has.
When I go to China, I'm always amazed at the interest they have in what we've done to their national drink. So I find chains of English-style tea rooms appearing across China. I have to do tastings and talks about English tea style. It sounds strange, but I have to actually consciously think, what is the English tea style? It's just what we do.
That's the thing about tea. It's got tradition and trend, it's got evolution and revolution. It's got culture and craft, it's got history, geography, biology. So, what's not to love?
If you had magically taken away tea over the last 1,000 years, both in China and the West, we would be living in a totally different world.
It's very important to have tea as a type of language to build up the bridge just between the two cultures. The real story is tea as a thread to knit us together. There is no distance between you and me.